I'll begin by saying that I, 24 male, come from a very well-known West African country, and I come from one of the three major ethnic groups in my country. My country has a lot of oil, and my father, 64 male, is an engineer and worked for a very big oil company here before he retired a few years ago. He's the second of three children. Due to his job, salary, and position within the company, he became an entire family's breadwinner. His elder brother had 7 children with his wife, and his younger brother had 2 children with his late wife. And my father trained each and every one of them. He sent them all to school through their nursery and primary and secondary schools, and when they all graduated from high school, he gave each of them an option of either going to a higher institution or helping them start up a business of their own. Every Christmas, we'd travel to the village and he'd buy multiple 50-kilogram bags of rice, tons of groceries, specially dried fishes, and so much more, and he'd distribute to the entire family, aunts, uncles, etc. He catered for all his siblings, cousins, old friends in the village, as well as their respective families so much, and it sometimes offended my mother because while he took excellent care of us, and she was never against him helping his siblings out, she felt he was making them overly dependent on him. He opened a thriving business for his older brother's wife and stocked up her business with all the necessary wares, and he did the same for his younger brother, and yet whenever they had a problem, they'd choose to call him instead of solving even the most basic problems by themselves. This is all preamble to show you that he really cared for his family. There are a few cases of prime entitlement I'd like to point out. Case 1. This involves my father's eldest brother's wife, we'll call Rita, and her eldest son we'll call Chris. Rita is a woman in her 50s, and Chris is in his mid-30s. When Chris was born, his mother despised him because given our tradition and culture, she felt like his pregnancy forced her into a marriage she did not want, so she took out her frustrations on him. When he was 11, my mother was a newlywed, and on one of her trips accompanying my dad to the village, she saw how Rita physically abused her own son, which is pretty common here under the guise of discipline. And out of fear for his safety, my parents asked his father to let them take Chris with them back to the city, so they could in a sense foster him as their own to remove him from that environment. I was barely a year old at this point. Chris lived with us for roughly 18 years. He got a good education, and when it was time to go to the university, he had a lot of problems gaining an admission. In my country, all the universities, both state and federal, are under an organization, and everyone takes an annual national exam based on your intended course of study, and those who do the best are admitted into their institution of choice. He'd taken this exam for about 6 years, and each time he'd fallen short and hadn't received an admission. So my dad gave him the option to continue trying, or to put it on hold and learn a good trade for about a year, and after that, he'd open a business for him, and maybe he could try getting into the university later on if he still wanted. He chose the latter option, and he was sent off to another city to stay with a family friend who taught him all he needed to know about the given business for free, and after a year, he returned back home. My father gave him what is equivalent to $12,000 to begin a business. Over here, $12,000 is a very, very big chunk of money, especially with the low cost of living here compared to our Western counterparts, and also, especially how lax our tax laws are here. My dad offered him a check for that amount, and he refused it, saying how small the money was. My dad had already found a really good space for him to run his business, and had paid and rented it out for 2 years for him, as well as paying his water and electric bills. The $12,000 was an initial capital for him to stock up on his wares, without having to worry about rent or any critical expenses for 2 years at least. All he had to do was simply make sales and bring in profit, so that after 2 years, he could afford to take on the expenses on his own, because he probably would have saved quite a bit of money in that time, and even if he had difficulties, knowing my dad, he would have jumped in to help. However, Chris rejected the money, saying how small it was, and he was expecting at least $17,000. That although the space my dad had rented for him was in a prime location, that it was too small for him, and that he had found a much bigger space a few blocks away, and he expected my dad to pay for that as well. He said he had big ideas and didn't want my dad to repress his ideas, so he needed the appropriate support. My mother just about lost her head hearing this and chastised him about how ungrateful he was being. She asked him how many people were willing to do the things my dad had done for him. She asked him why he couldn't use this fund as an initial capital and begin his business and strive to make it successful so that he could afford to move into that larger space after the 2 years lease was up. He got upset and called his mother, with whom relations had improved significantly over the years, and she too tore my dad a new one. She screamed in our native language about how, after the stress he must have been under by not getting into the university, the least you can do is make sure this dream of his is nurtured fully. Why are you being an akanchi, which means stingy in my language? You have the money, so just do as he asks in the way that he asks. If you died today, would they bury you with your money? You are not setting a good example as his uncle. Tufekwa, which basically means, God forbid. My father did not respond and promptly ended the call. Later on, his dad, my father's brother, called him, and I don't know what was said, but after that, he came and picked up the check where he'd previously dropped it and muttered a half-hearted thank you before leaving. My dad also received a call from his brother apologizing for his behavior. Fast forward 2 years, and this was now 2016. I was 18-19, and my immediate younger sister, 12 female, was now in secondary school, and my other siblings were also in primary school, so the financial burden on my dad was quite a lot during this time, so he called Chris and had a talk with him. This was sometime in October, and my dad said that since Chris's business was going well, that perhaps it was time for him to move out from our home, maybe by the new year, so that the financial constraints could be alleviated a bit. Now, mind you, Chris had lived with us for 18 years since I was barely a year old, and he was 11-12 years old, and now I was 18-19 years old, so he was about 29-30 years old. He never paid rent for 1 day, or paid for utilities. My dad always did. He never bought his own food or groceries either. My dad did that too for almost 2 decades he lived with us. When my dad asked him to move out, he said nothing, and like before, called his mother. I have no idea what was said, but she called my dad in a fury that evening, screaming her head off about how my dad has never really cared about her son's success and brought up the $12,000 incident from a few years earlier. She said something along the lines of, "You want him to leave your house while your wife's sister is still living with you. This is how little you care about your brother and his family. My son doesn't need you or your charity. My God will help him to survive with or without you," and so on. The wife's sister she referred to was a young niece of my mom's who had lost her parents to militant actions in one of our cities, and she was barely 15 at the time. After that call, he packed his things and was gone in a few weeks. This was 2016, and I haven't seen or heard from him since then. They view my dad as a bad person for not giving him the amount of money he wanted and for asking him, a 30-year-old man with a thriving business, to move out. Your dad and your immediate family sound like great people. Your extended family, not so much. Coming from a similar situation, although not quite as expensive or extensive, it is very tough seeing your parents continually help people who, instead of appreciating it, feel not only entitled to what is being freely given to them, but feel entitled to even more. Since your aunt believed her God will help him survive, with or without your dad, then she shouldn't be so angry at your dad asking the cousin to move out after supporting him for 18 years. Since God can help him survive, she should have just kept him at home instead of shipping him off for your dad to support. Your father sounds like a very generous man, providing not only monetarily, but also long-term planning. Teach a man to fish concept. He should be proud of the impact he is making on your extended family, even if they act like entitled jerks. Dude in his 30s acting like he's 9, calling his mommy for help when it doesn't go his way. Your father is a very nice man, but your mom is absolutely right. Your dad is being way too nice, hence the spoilness of your family. So, a little backstory. Before I came out as transgender, I had this really nice guy as a boyfriend. He took me out to dinner and spoiled me. In the beginning of July, end of June, he broke up with me over texts, and we haven't spoken since. Now for the story. Earlier today, I found out that my so-called bestie, we'll call her Brittany, is 29 weeks and 5 days pregnant with my ex's, we'll call him Isaiah, baby. This means that she was sneaking around with him while Isaiah and I were together. I had no ducking clue until she posted it on Facebook that she can't wait for her beautiful baby girl to be here. I ducking wanted kids with Isaiah, and she ducking knew it. What do I do? Neither will talk to me. Edit to add. A lot of you guys are confused about my transition and such. I officially came out as transgender in mid-August. The reason I mention children in here is because I plan on keeping my uterus after I fully transition, so I can have the family I always wanted. Another thing, had Isaiah gotten me pregnant when we were together, to this day I would be 27 weeks or in my 6th month. She is only 2 weeks ahead of what I should be if I was pregnant. Update. So yesterday, about 2 hours after I posted the first, I got a call from Isaiah and Brittany. Mind you, this is the first time they have called me since July of 2021. I answered it, and this is the following conversation. Me. Hello? B. Hey girl, where are you? You're not at your house. Me. I'm at college, Brittany. B. Well, how about you come on home? I have someone for you to meet. Me. I cannot just up and leave campus for your BS, Brittany. Besides, I already knew. B. What? I. Are you really that petty? Dead name. Me. I am not petty, and my name is now Liam. And yes, I already knew you guys had been ducking behind my back. B. Well, that's in the past. Do you think you could be the godmother of our baby? It'd mean the world to me. Me. Hell no, I will not. You both hurt me in unimaginable ways when I was already in a semi-fragile state to begin with. I hung up on them after that, and they still haven't stopped blowing up my phone with texts and voicemails asking if I will be the godfather. They said godmother to their baby. Honestly, I feel sorry for the little baby, as she won't feel the love she needs after she starts school. Best to block both of them on all social media and phone. They are just looking to get a rise out of you and rub that salt in the wounds deeper. Hate to say it, they're probably looking to see if you'll be willing to watch the baby and or do things. When they said, oh yeah, we want you to be this, it's basically so they could use you as a free babysitter and expect to get gifts for the poor baby since they probably won't even do that. Block these clowns. Like the audacity to try to insert you into their lives when they did you dirty, just to add insult to injury. Yeah, avoid that garbage fire. Screenshot their texts and show them to people who will try to harass you. Don't be their godfather, because they're just trying to use you as a babysitter. The cast. Entitled neighbor. Female 40s. EN. Me, 16 female. M. I was, to my knowledge, alone and taking a shower, as my parents had gone out to run an errand. I had the window in the shower slightly ajar so I could hear when my parents pulled into the driveway and opened the front door. About 5 minutes later, I heard the front door open and shut. My first thought was, oh, my parents are home, and I continued my shower. Foolish as I am, I didn't think twice about the fact that I didn't hear the car pull in. I finished not long after. I walked out the bathroom fully clothed, thankfully, and began skipping to the living room. Then, on the couch, seated, was a middle-aged woman who I definitely did not know, drinking some of my older sister's juice, meaning she had been in our fridge unconsented. I was a bit too stunned to speak, not scared per se, as this woman looked harmless and appeared to be unarmed. I tried to reach for my phone on the dining table to call the police, but she stood up and blocked me. I could apprehend her if necessary. However, this woman easily looked like one of my mother's clients, and my mother has a tendency of letting people over without informing me beforehand, so I thought this could be another instance, so I was not overly concerned. The following conversation ensued. Entitled neighbor. You look just like your mother. Me. I look nothing like my mother. Entitled neighbor. Oh, but you have your brother's eyes. Me. I don't have a brother. Entitled neighbor. Ah, then you're your father's daughter. Me. You would know better than me. I haven't seen him in 5 years. This was false, but I wanted to see if she knew this. Entitled neighbor. Who are you? Me. That's my question. Why are you in my house? Entitled neighbor. Your house? You're a child. Don't speak to me like that. Where are your parents? No joke. This woman really had the audacity to say this. Me. None of your concern. Kindly leave before I call the authorities. Entitled neighbor. You! What kind of people raise such a snobby bee? Me. Excuse me? Mind your manners in my home. Move aside, please. I stepped around her and brushed her with my shoulder as I grabbed my phone. Entitled neighbor begins banshee screaming that I have assaulted her by shoving her aside. I get my phone about to call my parents when I heard the garage door opened. I thanked whatever Lord there is and rushed to the door. I run to my dad and started babbling about the strange woman who trespassed into our home while I was showering. Less than 20 minutes later, cops are pulling up to our home and entitled neighbor is escorted to the station. My dad had told her to stay put if she didn't want him to press charges. We then find out she is our new neighbor, and this was her attempt of getting to know us. I am mortified and express my opinion to my dad that he should press charges. Entitled neighbor begins banshee screaming again that he said he wouldn't. After a quick look at our home security cameras, our case was proclaimed valid, and my dad is pressing charges. I don't know the mechanics or specifics of it all, but I'm happy he took my opinion into consideration. Edit. I see the same comment that the door was not locked. It was. I swear I made sure everything was locked before I got in the shower. We have a very quiet lock on our front door, but a very creaky door itself. That's why I heard the door open. I honest to God have no clue how she undid the lock. I'm sorry if I implied that I had left the door open, but no, that wasn't the case. My dad would never allow me. I always lock the door when I'm home. It used to drive my wife crazy, but one day we both watched a guy walk right up to our door and check to see if it was unlocked. The guy then cupped his face with his hands and close to the window to look in. He didn't see us and wandered off. Now my wife locks the door too. That neighbor of yours seems backcrap crazy. A new neighbor just walking into strangers' homes uninvited and helping themselves to a drink, mind you, is just bonkers. Unfortunately, I have a feeling this won't be the last weird encounter with that Fruit Loop.